Welcome to Trends Literature Series, your go-to destination for captivating podcasts and insightful conversations. 132nd episode today, 100 Trends Literature Series. And we have the youngest author who's ever graced a platform, Parineita Ahuja, joining us all the way from Boston. She's written this wonderful book, Imaginations Wild. And to tell you briefly about Parineita, she studied at University of Buffalo for 5 years, has been working in a biotech firm for the last 2 years. So Parineita, it's lovely to have you with us today. So good to talk to a young and dynamic girl like you, whose vision and spark and motivation, and I must say, enthusiasm is quite contagious.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this platform. I'm extremely excited to talk about my book. Even though it got published only like I think 2.5 years ago, it still continues to be one of the most interesting facts about me. So I love talking about my book, and I'm excited to chat about it with you as well.
Your writing, I felt when I went through the book, is quite natural. And you write with no stress at all. It's like very flowy. It's quite focused, very readable. And I must say, it looks as if you just started with the story and just finished it off in so effortlessly in one go, though I'm sure it was very different the way it comes out. But I'm sure this is how it was, maybe in some ways. So, how did this story really come about, and when did you really plan to write about it? So, all about it from you, that'll be better. And how was it like putting it into paper? Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly never intended to write a book. That was never the goal. It was never something that I thought I would ever do. I started writing a random chapter story about someone. I don't know who this someone was. I just was in college one summer. I was like, you know what? I have some free time. I love enjoy writing. And so I started putting this character down on paper, and somehow it ended up being a book, multiple chapter story. And I remember I would like write one chapter and I'd like hang out with my friends at night, and I'd like give it to them for reading, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, this is so great. Like, when is the next chapter coming?" So it was super fun. It was never meant for someone else. It was always meant for me, and something to, keep myself occupied with, and to explore what more can I think of, and what more can I imagine in my mind. I'm sure I have many stories in there hidden. And here we were, I think like 3 months later, there was a book. There was a book that I didn't think was ever going to get published until it did, and it was real. So yeah, it was a very gratifying journey, because I wrote it for myself. So I think when you write for yourself, there is no, as you said, like there's no pressure to please someone. There's no pressure that, I'm writing for someone else. What are they going to think of this character? What are they going to think of these friends? What is their viewpoint on this? It's all about you. It's what you think, what you want on paper. Who are you imagining when you write this character? Anam, when I'm writing her, it's like it's all about me. And I think that's the best kind of writing you can do, is when you just write for yourself, because you don't add this layers of pressure and this expectation that, oh my God, it has to be the best writing in the world. It ends up being great, yes. It doesn't always start off like that, but it ends up being great. Yeah.
There was a lot of hope, a lot of positivity, a lot of very good vibes in the book. It was not negative at all. And I love that fact about the book. Sometimes you don't want to kind of be negative, and it was only going from, uh, one positive to another. And I think that makes the book really tick. You're in today's world, you really need something very exciting, something very positive coming out. But I noticed that, you begin your novella with a quote by Jean de La Fontaine. You kind of started it at the back when you read about the story, that a person
Yeah.
often meets their destiny on the road they took to avoid it. So how does it really kind of resonate with the main protagonist story, in this case, Anam's story, Anam's journey?
Yeah. I think, well, when you read the book, it really, it's a very fast-paced book. It's very like
Mm.
going. There's no like, okay, a moment of calm. There's always just like chaos, and something's brewing, either in Anam's head, or Anam's writing, or Anam's life. Something is always happening. And I think that is what I really mean when I wrote this book, is that, life just continuously happens. Like the slightest of things. I'm not even saying big things where you're getting signed for an internship at, a huge production house. I'm saying the tiny things of, like, meeting a great friend, getting coffee at your favorite place, or getting Italian food at one of your, most loved dinner restaurants where you work. It's like, it's the tiniest things that we don't appreciate, and it's something I didn't appreciate for a very, very long time. I was always like, and I'm still that person who goes from one thing to the next, let's just keep going, keep going. And in that process, I think this book was very important for me because I learned to appreciate the smaller things that are just as important as any big things that happen to you, going to the US for an education that I went for, getting into one of my favorite schools, to get into a program, all the big things, getting a job in Boston when it was all in the middle of COVID. Never thought I would end up with a job here. And it's like the big things, but in between, like the tiny things, where I got to spend such great time during COVID with my best friends, and now we see each other every New Year's trip because we got so close. So it's like, I think the book, really, the concept came from that. It was like, there's positivity and optimism everywhere you look. It's really just about the choices you make. And I'm a firm believer of, like, yes, life happens to you, but you also happen to life. It's a balance of one and another. You make a choice based on the cards you're dealt. And then, it's a domino effect. That's what I believe life is. And I think the book really exhibits that very nicely.
Absolutely. It's all about your personal experiences that you've had as a student in Bookfellow. I recognize this a lot because both my daughters are in London, one of them studying, one of them working there. So, these kind of conversations we have quite often because this is
Yeah,
how it is and this is how you take the life and how you make it out to be, these smaller things,
yeah,
how you learn to appreciate. And there's so
yeah,
much to appreciate in life. So that's
yeah,
how it reflects so well in your book. Coming back to the book, and as we're talking about it, I mean, I noticed that the theme of adoption and cultural diversity, it's quite evident in Anam's story. It's kind of reflects maybe perhaps your observations in Buffalo in US, and kind of you've taken it to a different trajectory, but in a way, kind of there's a parallel, right?
yeah.
So how did your personal experiences and observations contributed to portraying these elements of cultural diversity and adoption, kind of?
Yeah. I honestly always ask myself this. Sometimes I'll even write about it. Is like, I don't understand what the concept of adoption came from, because it's not something I actually avidly think about on a daily basis. It's not something, I've not seen. I've many people who are adopted, or don't have friends who are adopted into families. So that's a unique concept to me. I don't understand why that got woven into the book. But I will talk about the diversity and the immigration aspect of it, things, because Buffalo was a very diverse school. People from all backgrounds, from a lot of money to no money, came to Buffalo because it's a state school. And I'm sure you understand a bit of that. Your daughters are in London, and there's a huge cultural diversity in London as well. Um, I grew up in India, in Delhi, Delhi, Faridabad area. All Indians around me most of the times. I really just the more and but that in itself tells you, because India in itself is such a diverse place, from religion to languages to food. And so I always appreciated that. I've always recognized it, and I've never really, like, I didn't grow up in a one state like Punjab, where it's like most people are Punjabis. Like, I grew up in Delhi, where it's like, I had Bengali friends, I had Punjabi friends, I had Gujarati friends. And I feel like when I came to the US, that sort of reflected in my friendships as well. It wasn't just that I was friends with Indians, I wanted to know about every culture. I wanted to learn. There's a reason why I'm moving. I want to see what this world has to offer. And I think that sort of has changed the outlook of how I see the world now. That it's not just about, the small town you grew up in. It's about, everything you do, every action you take. Even me writing that book sort of contributed to this conversation about cultural diversity and accepting people who don't look like you, or who are not like you, who didn't grow up like you. And I don't think anything would have surmounted to the experience that I've had in Buffalo and in Boston, and working in such diverse cities and states in the world. So I think that shows how much I've grown as a person in the book, especially when I like start talking about immigration in the book and adoption. I don't know where that came from, but I guess it's ingrained in my mind so much that I don't need to avidly think about it to write about it, which is you can't buy that experience.
And I feel that maybe immigration kind of relates to adoption in a way. I mean,
That's true.
adjusting to a totally a different, maybe that's how it came from.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how maybe, some parallels there that, yes,
yeah.
as an immigrant or somebody coming from outside, totally a different world, coming in, adjusting and being there now in your
Yeah,
mind.
being an outsider. Yeah, I
Yes,
think that's
yes.
what it is. It's
That is
about being
how it
an
was.
outsider.
That's how
Yeah,
I drew the parallel. I thought maybe that's
yeah,
where the thought process came from.
yeah.
Yeah, and another something very important that you've touched upon that your the protagonist, Anam's mother, original mother, the birth mother, she wanted
Mm-hmm.
her to become a lawyer, but
Mm-hmm.
finally, she wanted to fulfill her birth mother's dream, which was a significant choice for her. But how did you really, as an author, and which is very important. I mean, I think this topic is very important from a youngster point of view. Sometimes you kind of feel it gets ingrained in your mind that what you've been taught since the beginning, yes, this is what you have to become. But how did you explore the balance between personal dreams and fulfilling other people's expectation in your narrative?
Yeah, I think that that was something that I was struggling with at that time myself. I came to the US knowing that okay, I wanted to do medicine. I took my MCATs. I was ready to apply.
Mm.
And suddenly one week I was like, okay, but this is not what I want anymore. This is what I wanted for a long time, but this is just not what I want right now anymore for myself. And I think a lot has to do with the experiences that I've had on campus, being in a different country, how much I've learned about myself. And there were just aspects of myself that I didn't see that exist when I was younger, and saw myself being a doctor at that time. And I'm not saying I won't go back to that self one day. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I think it's just that's the part that I wanted to weave into the story when I was writing about it, because I myself was struggling with it, figuring it out. And I think it sort of helped me figure it out while I was writing it. I don't think I actively sat down with myself and was like, okay, what do you want to do next? What are you going to do? I didn't ask the big questions. I think I asked the big questions um, no, I guess I asked the big questions. I didn't answer them for myself. I answered them through writing. When I was writing is when I started to figure out, okay, this is not what I want, but I know what I want. And I know myself. Even if I don't know, and this is to other people who are younger, who are trying to figure out what they don't want, is like, if you don't know what you want or do know what you want, give yourself space to like find qualities about yourself that you enjoy, that you want to keep for the rest of your life. There are aspects of yourself that you won't discover until maybe you're like 50, 70. I don't know. It's like, every day is a new day. So give yourself space to learn qualities about yourself that you would want to keep for the rest of your life, because those are the qualities you want to take with you when you work full time, when you spend 8 to 10 hours of your life, of your day doing something in your life every week. You want to make sure you preserve yourself and the qualities that you like about yourself, and give yourself that space. And the space that you get is when you go to college, or when you're, I mean, the space is the rest of your life, I guess. But for me, a lot of it was when I was in college, because I learned how social I am as a person. I learned how much I value relationships and friendships, and building your own family outside of the family you were born in. I think those things I didn't learn about myself until I moved, you know? So I think I needed to give myself some time and not rush myself. So I think that's what I learned, and hopefully put into writing as I wrote Imaginations Wild.
You're so right. And, Mrs. Smith, who was the one of the parents of this girl, Anam, the one who adopted her, the two lines by her, which were very, very reflective of it, what she just said, that unless you walk down it, you will never know the right path. That's what tells you, tells the, that sums it up. That sums
Yeah.
up the how each parent should do it. I'm sure that's reflective of perhaps how your parents helped you out with the whole process. And and our mistakes makes us the people we are. I mean, these are very, very
Exactly.
profound lines, yeah. And also,
Yeah.
writing, I've always felt is quite therapeutic. I mean, I've seen my elder daughter, who's as old as you, a spoken word poetess. She writes down things, and I think somewhere, it gets a clarity what she wants to do and how she wants to go on. So it's kind of really engages, and that's where my next question comes in about this Mr. General who plays such a big part in your book. So we can perhaps talk about it, and maybe could you kind of elaborate on the symbolism behind Mr. General and its significance in Anam's journey?
I think I guess for me, and this is another thing that I've reflected on, because a few months ago I reread the book and I was like, what's like the symbolism of characters here? And I'm not gonna maybe not just focus on one character, but like understand how like the professor's relationship with Anam,
Yeah.
or it's
Same.
such a complicated relationship, it's not easy to digest, as especially as a young person. It's not something that many people can just digest and be like, oh, that's normal, or that's normalized, or or and I think that's one thing that I really love. And I was actually talking to one of my friends the other day, because I love reading. I'm a huge reader. I don't get to do it as often. I would like to do it, but I love enjoy reading and enjoy reading. One of the things that I'm starting to discover about myself is that I don't like to read books that are very focused on one aspect of a character. Like I like when my characters are complicated to read. I'm sure it reflects in my writing as well. But I love complicated characters. I love when there's this side of you that maybe the world doesn't accept, that you are putting it in writing. And that is, I think that is one of the things that I wanted to put down when I also talk about the professor's relationship with Anam, is like, it's a complicated relationship. It's not something that is very normalized, but it exists, and it's to understand what we can be accepting of and what can be normal for one person is not normal for the other. And it's the same way, it's like, other characters in the book, Anam's relationship with her adopted father, or
Open.
Anam's relationship. Yeah, exactly. And it's a very straightforward relationship, but it's still complicated because you don't look the same as each other. You don't belong to the same cultures. Even though Anam was raised by them, there's a part of her that doesn't belong there, for in her mind, of course, not according to the father, I'm guessing, when I wrote it down. But also then there's the relationship between Anam and um the friends she met at work, or this person who offered her an internship, Mr. Warper, is like it's also a complicated relationship at the same time, because you met this random stranger. But it also reflects back to my experiences, where I've been very lucky to have met some great people who have offered me some brilliant opportunities that I honestly can't look back at my life the same way anymore, because had they not been there, my life would have been so different. I can't even imagine it. So I think that's that same goes for the professor's relationship with Anam. It's like, it's that relationship of like, when a person comes to your life, you don't expect them to change your life, but everything's different after that. I think that is what really I wanted to put that down on paper, because I'm a person who values relationships a lot. For me, like, my personal relationships are like the most important thing in my life. So I hope that reflected that in the book.
How very deep and reflective at your age, thinking like that. I'm sure a lot of youngsters who will ultimately watch this interview will really have a lot to follow from your journey, from also the journey of Anam, which somewhere definitely has parallels,
With me, yeah.
a lot of parallels, yeah. And I felt that Anam's mentor, finally, Professor Alice James, definitely impacted her journey, kind of really helped her. It was a very nice relationship. It kind of impacted her journey. She could very openly discuss her plans with him. That's so important in any kind of relationship. And that,
Yeah.
I suppose, irrespective of the fact that it was a little unnatural, it's kind of, as you said, it's quite uncommon. So yeah, but it like really helped her develop the person that she is.
Yeah.
Um, the story kind of suggests that Anam loses her Mr. General, and definitely that's one very, very big part of the book, which we kind of can't really delve into in depth because I'll give up
Yeah.
with the story. We want more and more people to read this story, even if
Yeah.
it's been there from the last 2 years, and that is the whole purpose of the conversation as well, that I would definitely request everyone to read this wonderful book. I mean, I finished it in, I suppose, 2 hours. That perhaps I'm a very, very fast reader, but once you can't put down a book, you kind of carry it
Done,
onwards.
done good. Yeah.
So, not giving much away, how do you feel that the loss of Mr. General, the diary,
Yeah. Um,
impacted, kind of impacted Anam's life? Yeah.
I think for me, my journal is like one of the most sanctuary places in the world. I write one of my things that I can't even possibly say out loud. Sometimes I'll write it down because I'm like, I don't know who else to tell this to. And to have to even go through the thought process, like I was thinking the other day, I generally like to type over writing these days because it's easier to keep track of things, not losing things. But I'm like, what if my files corrupt one day and I can't access this? It's like, the thoughts that go through my mind where I'm like, wow, what will happen like if I lose? Because it's like losing a part of myself. And I feel like that is what Anna must have felt in that moment. And what's funny is like at that time I wasn't consistently journaling a lot. I was journaling, but not as often as I do now. And it's like, I'm realizing the relationship that Anam and the journal had with each other now, after like 2.5 years later.
Yeah.
Uh, but I can understand that because um, it's like, imagine one day you wake up and you're like, I can't remember what the last 50 years have looked like for me. Let me go read my journal, you
Oh,
know? And it's not there anymore. It's like and I feel like for Anam, having lived only 20 years, but living 50 years of her life in 20 years, because she's like been adopted in that process. She's like found out, that she's so different from everybody around her where she was raised. Then she finds out she's this whole family in India. It's like this she's lived more than many people ever live in their entire lives in those 20 years. So imagine one day you wake up and you're like, I don't know where that is. I don't know where, it's gone. I mean, I'm sure it's not gone because it's in your mind, but like sometimes to put it in writing makes it so much easier to remember things and to feel them. And so that I'm sure it must have been a shock, and I hope when the readers read it, they somewhere can put themselves, and it doesn't have to be just a journal or something. It can be a person in your life that can be a journal for you, that you're like, oh, imagine this person was not a part of my life one day.
mhm.
Or I wake up and they were never my friend, or they were not my parent, or whatever. Imagine just that one thing that you can openly tell your deepest, darkest secrets to, and they don't exist anymore. That is, I think, the relationship to really, I'm sure there's more we can write about that, and there's more many people have felt. But yeah, I think that's what I was aiming for.
No, fantastic. I mean, I read somewhere that you at 21 kind of wrote the first draft of the book. So,
Yeah.
and I think you've grown with the book. How do I suppose writing kind of clears it up, clears your mind, and at the same time you're journaling, you're writing this book. I'm sure, as we've been talking about it since the beginning of this conversation, I'm sure it is making you the person that you are. I mean, I'm loving talking to you. I mean, talking to a young girl like you, and I can sort of see some perspectives of mine already changing. So
Yeah.
fantastic. But
Thank
how
you.
did you, at the age of suppose 21, if we talk about the first draft that you wrote, that was definitely an accomplishment. So how did your youth and experiences kind of reflected, kind of changed you with the book? I mean, it contributed to the energy and perspective of writing this book. So, how was
Yeah.
it at
I
21
think
and how's it now for you?
Yeah, I'm 26 now. I turned 26 a week ago, and I wrote my first draft. Wow, 21 at 21. That's 5 years. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in the last 5 years, which honestly the book was like the fastest way to do it for me, was to be open to changes, to be open to the fact that life is not always gonna go how you pictured it to go, and that life will always throw you curveballs. And I said it's like a domino effect. It's you're dealt cards, you choose a card, and then okay, then there's following cards after that. It's like keeps going. And I think that's the fun of it. It's like imagine knowing the rest of your 70 years of your life. it's planned out. You already know what's going to happen. That sucks. That's sad. And why would you want that for yourself? And I think for a long time, I wanted that. I wanted the stability of knowing what was going to happen, everything in control. And the last 5 years of anything but control, they've been all over the place. I didn't know I was going to end up in Boston. I didn't know what job I was going to end up in. Now I can't imagine my life without it. I can't look at my life back and be like, oh wow, imagine Boston was not a part of your life. Imagine the people you wouldn't have met, and the great, great, great stories you can tell now to your kids, or the ones that you can write. So it's like, be open to the curveballs, because that's what makes life fun. And it took me 5 years to be okay to say that out loud, but now I'm saying it, and I think there's nothing better than that feeling.
And I'm sure that you reflected on the book. You took some time to write it. You kind of found the right people to kind of carry it forward.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you spent a lot of time on the cover as well. So how was it?
Yeah.
I find it
Yeah.
quite interesting. I mean, very simple, like the book, but very, very nice. Yeah.
I think for me, one of the biggest things is finding depth in the simplicity of things. Because
Hmm.
there's one thing that I've always, like, my dad always says is like, 80% of your life is going to be boring. Well, not boring. It's going to be simple. Yeah. Like, you can be anybody. You can be Taylor Swift. You can be anyone in this world. You can be Jeff Bezos, and still your regular 20 hours of your 4 hours are going to look normal. You're going to wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, talk to your kids, the simpler things in life. That's what everybody does. And to be okay with that, to be okay with the simplicity, the monotony of life, because that's what life is about. Like, you can't have chaos brewing all the time,
Hmm.
you know and I think that's where the concept of the book comes from, and the cover comes from, is like, the simpler things, but there's depth to it. There's depth to the simpler experiences of life that I'm hoping to appreciate as I grow older more. Yeah.
Yeah. And also talking about influences, I think your father has had one of the biggest influences on you, in the sense that he's been a journalist, author, now an industrialist, but all the same. And your mother being a banker, I think your support strong system also kind of made you the person you are. And I read somewhere that even the title of the book was given by your father.
Yeah.
So how is had been to have such supportive parents in your life? That's most important, I think, to be able
Yeah.
to be free to do what you want to do and be able to discuss everything with them. And they are able to understand your vision without kind of really crowding you over. So how does it
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, I mean, the title of the book is actually the title of my dad's first book. The title of the book was supposed to be something else, and then I randomly, I think 2 months before it got published, everything was ready to go, and I changed my mind, and I was like, I don't want that title. Can I borrow this from you? And he very graciously was like, yes, please. Um, and I think, I mean, I have tremendously great parents. They're very supportive, very open-minded, as open-minded as it gets. Um, but I've learned to appreciate where they've said no, where they've said, well, not really no, but where they've objected. It's like, you can't have a parent who always says yes to everything. It's
Mhm.
like, the objections have really con it gives you conviction. It's like, why am I so serious about what I want to convince them about? And so I'm like, okay, finding 10 different reasons to make sure that they understand why that's something so important to me. And I think that is very important. That's a fine balance. Like, they're very open-minded, and they will listen to you. They're not always going to be like, okay, yeah, this is a good idea just because you've thought of it. No, like, they have 40 years of life experience before that. They have things that they have to say that I'm sure they things that I shouldn't have done, that I'm sure they had opinions about, and they kept their mouth shut. Um, but it's also, I think, giving you the space, as I said, was like, to make the mistakes that when you look back are really not the mistakes. They make you the person you are. But it's unless if again, if I have the rest 70 years of my life planned out by my parents or by myself, thinking that, oh, they've made the mistakes, I don't need to make them. What fun is going to be life? It's like, you make the mistakes, you learn from them, of course. you run it by them. I think my brother and I have a very open relationship with my parents, where if we have ideas or if we have thoughts, we can tell them and we'll work through. Like even writing the book, like I didn't tell my dad until the book was finished that I'm writing a book or that I wrote something, you know. Um, and when he read it, I was like, oh, it's just nothing. And then he read it and he was like, wait, that's such a good draft of something you just wrote for yourself. You didn't even intend for others to write. So that motivation and that push to, keep doing what you're doing is very, very important. I mean, he's the one who motivated me to start writing when I was like 5 years old. I wrote poems for one of the characters he came up with for his advertising company, and that's where my writing journey begins. So couldn't have been more thankful for such great parents. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. And what next? What are your future plans? What are you planning? What are you writing? And what are you giving us next?
Yeah, I hope to continue writing more. My last year was a little less of writing and more of reading, and I've been applying to business schools a lot, so that's been on my mind. But now I'm starting to get back to more fiction writing. I was journaling, of course, but starting to write a little bit more creative writing stories, and I'm starting this thing where it's like hopefully like once a month or like twice a month, I can sit down and just write like a 500-word story about a random character, random person I've met that week or that month. Like it doesn't have to be someone I know. It has to be someone I saw on the train that I was like, oh, they're interesting, and just come up a background story for them. I think just to like polish up my creative writing. So I'm hoping to continue to do that, and hopefully there'll be a second book because of that.
No, no, I'm sure whosoever would read this book would definitely look so much more from you. And I wish the conversation goes on and on, but we have some kind of a time limit. And what do you want to say in the end about the book, or anything that you would like to convey to your future readers or the readers already who've read your book? I mean,
Yeah.
anything from you.
Well, first, thank you to you for interviewing me and hosting this. This has been I have not visited these conversations in so long. It's been like 2 years since it got published. It's like I'm reminiscing the time when I wrote it, and it was so fun. So thank you for giving me this platform to talk about my book. Second, I'm excited for people who are going to buy the book and read this book. And please, like, I always accept feedback. So I'm sure my Instagram is going to be tagged. So if you have any feedback as a reader, feel free to Instagram message me. I love to hear feedback on like stories that I could potentially write, or a character development, So I love any kind of feedback, and I hope I can keep writing, and we can keep having these conversations.
No, no, definitely. And wish you all the luck with your
Thank
current
you.
job,
Thank
with
you,
your
Auntie.
next book, with your dream of making it to the best. I'm sure you will make it to the best business school. And thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, Parineeta, to
You.
have you with me. You've
Thank
been
you
the
so much.
youngest, but I think very, very profound, deep conversation we had. And we'll be putting it on the YouTube very soon. And I really want everyone to watch it and see how dreams can be made into reality with positivity and hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'm so glad to have talked to you.
And I request everyone to please, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on any of the future episode. And this is episode particularly, which will be on the YouTube very shortly. Thank you. Thank you,
Have
Pan.
a